governess at Aleph, but I'm currently the maternity cover for part of the music director position. So I only do the Saturday morning choral services.
Very good. Welcome, one and all. So firstly, I just really want to begin with what I think is just amazing news, but I will try to remember to mention it again. And of course, this will be communicated to you. So Zoe and I have been having some really wonderful conversations about what happens at conference. And two things that I'm really confident are going to go ahead is one, that we're making every effort to set up an opportunity for anybody who's comfortable to actually conduct a chosen ensemble for the purpose of getting to stand in front of a choir if you don't have that opportunity in whatever synagogue you work at, but also that there are some really wonderful things that we can all do personally to grow if given that opportunity, because the feedback, not only from the choir, but also from things that our fellow colleagues and that I would then share with you will be of inestimable value going forward. So that's something I'm very excited about. The other thing is that because of the feedback that you gave and because of the emails that some of you have sent privately, there's a lot of need, a lot of desire to just chat, to ask some questions, to get some solutions. Some people are really stuck in positions where there are quite a lot of challenges, both in terms of repertoire and politics. Other people are ready to go forward, move forward, but the challenge is recruiting choir members and retaining them. So it looks like we've designated an entire session at conference for that as well, meaning that today we're just going to spend time on the music. And that's the third and final thing before we jump, which is we've given a lot of thought, again, based on feedback of what people know, but also about the goals of the conference and opportunities that we want to maximize performing some of the pieces. So I can now officially announce that the three pieces that you should concentrate on, and of course you're welcome to look at the other pieces, but the ones that we would like your choirs to arrive at conference feeling pretty confident that they know what's going on are V'Shamaru, Shema Kolenu, and Shalom Aleichem. That means El Melech Yoshev. It would be my pleasure if you were singing it at your Slichot service or Kol Nidre. And the Ki HaMalchut is a remarkable concert piece. And I suspect that you wouldn't choose to do that in synagogue anyway. So just to repeat, the three pieces that we really want you to focus on with your choir so that they can get the most out of conference are V'Shamaru, Shema Kolenu, and Shalom Aleichem. We spent most of the time on V'Shamaru last time, so we might get back to it this evening, but I'd love you now to just turn to Shema Kolenu, because that's what we're going to begin with tonight. It's amazing that I'm saying tonight, because it's 2:40 in the afternoon. Here, anyway. I didn't get to do a sound check on piano and voice, so can I just confirm that everybody, can I just confirm that everybody can hear this? Can you put up behind if you can't hear that? Even louder, no problem. That didn't sound any different to me. That's a bit better. Okay, everybody in the street is now looking up at me. I do want to thank you if you have animated laughs, because it's really difficult when doing stand-up when there's no sound. So I just look at you, and those who naturally are intense and grumpy, God bless. But those of you who fall off your chair every time I say something ridiculous, and thank you as well. A number of people, not everybody, said that they wanted to contribute, and I love the thought that we can actually begin to cultivate a bit of a brain's trust. That would apply then to when people need repertoire, when people want somebody to come over to support them in their own synagogues and so forth. And so perhaps we can begin to cultivate that with this session. but I'm not ambushing anybody. So, if you just want to listen, or, if I throw a question out and you don't want to answer, I don't want anybody to feel pressured. But I will say again, the more you contribute, the more you'll probably get out of it. So I do actually have a question, and I'll throw it over to you. What's the very first thing that is of concern to you when starting this piece of music? And there's no right answer, because it may be, I'm concerned that I have no sopranos. But what I mean is, let's assume ideal choir, they know the music, they're looking at you. I do realize that all of those people have said no, but let's assume it's what we want, and you've worked very hard. The choir's looking up at you. I'm going to even lead the witness. The opening note has been given. What's the first challenge? Can anybody jump in? Just throw up a hand. Andre, unmute and do tell us what's on your mind.
It says PP at the start, and they've all got to start together.
So that's a marvelous thing. In an effort to give a clear indication so that they're confident, that they begin, that they start together, that they know when to start, you could end up giving a gesture that cultivates loud volume. Now, if they're sensitive and you've rehearsed this properly, they'll probably just ignore you. By the way, that's one of the great things that you'll learn about if you get a chance to conduct the choir, because when I say to the choir, only sing what you see, that will be a very powerful experience for some people. It was for me. The first time I was told the choir will only sing what they see, you suddenly realize that you have endless power, amazing power. So Andre's point is that if you were to go and give a generous gesture, there's the danger of asking people to sing too loudly. So having said that, would somebody else like to jump in with any other thought? What's the first thing on your mind? The pitch has been given. The choir's looking at you. What are you going to do next? Pray, okay. What are you going to do after that? Well, yes, here comes Mitch.
Breathe with them.
Okay. If you were to breathe with them, what does that help you figure out as well?
How long is needed, I guess, for that breath?
Yeah, I'm going to lead the witness in terms of what you're doing with your hands, because that breath equals the
preparatory gesture.
Exactly. So you're not going to go like this. In fact, even this we can try with the choir, where you give no preparatory gesture and you just start. In fact, we'll do it. Here we go. I can't hear you sing, but we're going to start. You missed it. So that's the point. You have to give them some sort of preparatory beat. I'm just using one hand. Breathe. Sh. So people saying, why can't I just go? I suppose you could, but no professional choirs are doing that. So you immediately put yourself in prison. You immediately say, we're not professional. We don't have the intention of actually occupying that world. Minimum number of beats. This isn't difficult, so you don't have to give them 1, 2, 3. 1 and 2, absolutely irrelevant. So the general rule is you're going to give the beat before the beat that they sing. So if it was the national anthem, God Save, which is God Save, you'd go, and God Save. In this case, it's 4/4. So if we were to beat a whole beat of 4/4, 1, 2, 3, sh. So now let's get rid of 1. Here's 2, 2, 3, sh. Now let's get rid of 2 and do 3 sh. 3 sh. Now, whether you're up like with this or closed hands or whatever, I mean, this gives a funny angle because that actually means stop. And every gesture I do seems to show you the palm of my hand because we're at the wrong level. But basically, 3, sh, and ma is landing on this imaginary tablecloth. So it's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Here it comes. 3, sh, ma. Anybody have any questions about that?
It's interesting because in the version that we have to sing of Shema Kolenu, we start with a quaver, and it's always been a bit haphazard, not coming in together to get people to come in on Shema with a quaver.
Yeah, really, really interesting point, because there are some pieces of music which we've all come across that when we're actually in the trenches and when we're actually doing them, there are certain bits that don't work. There are bits where you have semi-quaver pickups at the end of bars. They always sound clipped and rushed. Everybody naturally feels that they want to do a quaver pickup. Sometimes they turn it into a crotchet, but then they realize that they're losing the breath that they need. I think this would be difficult for a choir. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Shema. In fact, depending on your tempo, you might not feel comfortable having them put that sh if it was a quaver. Think about it. If I just do the main beats and the sh, as Millie described, would come in between 4 and the downbeat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Sh. For an amateur choir, that sh, it's happening in the middle. I can imagine myself being pulled into doing this. If I was, I'm not going to conduct the bar, but 1, I mean, in concert, in performance, I wouldn't, but here, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, sh, ma. So I've actually divided that last beat into 2 so that I'm actually giving a gesture on the sh just for clarity's sake. But you wouldn't need to do that with a bunch of professionals. But if you think about it, to go 3, 4, sh, ma, for some people that would be scary. For others, not. So the piece has started. You've given a great beat, and what do you immediately have to worry about? So you've given a small gesture, 3, sh, ma. What are you going to do? Are you going to go ma, ka? Just, are you going to stay in the air, just holding that chord static, plonked, like a pancake lying in a saucepan? Don't say yes. David, did you have a hand up?
Nearly.
Let me encourage you to go full hog.
Well, no, I thought you were going to, or just talk about the dynamic immediately coming up where the crescendo comes in.
Shoot, that's fine.
Yeah. I've always wondered how to effectively get crescendo or diminuendo out of choirs. So any kind of indication. I mean, I usually go like that or push or pull away towards and like that to try and get the crescendo and diminuendos going. How would you bring the next 2 bars out of them like that?
The simple answer would be, without bringing in the alternative hand, assuming that you're conducting with your right hand, the simple answer would be that you should be gesturing that sort of thing with your left hand. But in fact, conductors are often encouraged when starting out to see if they can convey much more into the hand that they're conducting with from the get-go. So this is actually a gift, because you probably are going to conduct the ma, and by general admission, the bigger your gesture, the more generous your gesture, the louder the music is. Which means if this is a soft 4, and this is a large 4, then it's as you increase from the small to the large that they're going to feel the increase in volume, which means you're going to start traveling longer distances. When I'm soft, I'm going from here to there. When I'm loud, I'm traveling from here to there. So this would be my right hand only conducting the ma, increasing. But remember, it's just a swell. It's not a increase to fortissimo. And it depends on the size of the group and how far they are away from you and so forth. So in theory, it depends, but this is what I imagine doing. Breathe. Sh, ma, 2, 3. And you can actually hear the music get louder. If I went without the swell, 3. Sh, ma. You can hear the sound doesn't change. Look again now with the crescendo. 3. Sh, ma. You can just feel that the sound. Now, some of you may feel that that and that is going to work for you if you've got the independence. Some people would feel adding in the second hand is going to work for you, although you have to be very careful not to become one of these conductors. That really doesn't help. It's actually called Grecian urn conducting, which is when you mirror a Grecian urn. So it's it's just, I mean, you just basically look as though you're bringing a British Airways, plane into land or at the gate. David.
I do admit I tend to conduct with both hands.
So the general advice is that it means that you're restricting what that second hand's impact is. Because you would agree that if you're actually doing something like this, and then the left hand comes up just before the basses come in, it's going to be far better than if you're going I personally find it distracting, let alone if you were doing sh, ma, and then the left hand went down again. And we'll talk about this at conference, but everything's online, let alone if you were to actually get a book and just do a little bit of, kind reading about how you can get beyond the gestures that we're finding that work for us and just graduate to something which will make your performances even more powerful. I should say, in case some people don't know this, all we're doing is finding a non-verbal communication. It's as simple as that. So why add in extraneous stuff if in fact it's also more tiring. Don't use conducting as the way of burning calories. We're moving on. Anything you want that you're concerned about with your choir? There's a really good points about the conductor. We've spoken about how much preparation does the choir need. We've suggested you only need to give the third beat, 3, and they'll come in on sh. We've spoken about the fact that you want to give a smaller gesture. You want to encourage them to swell on the ma. By the way, regardless of whether you have a technique that is very illustrative or very clear, you are allowed to just tell your choir what you want. I mean, you don't have to give a lecture, but simply say to them, when you get to ma, I would like you to get louder. If they're not getting louder, if they're not responding to the gesture, you can also say to them, by the way, if you notice my gesture becomes more generous, that I'm using to encourage you to increase the volume. If people are writing notes or taking mental notes, what you want to be sure of is that assuming they've sung a clean ah on ma, that they don't change the vowel as they get louder. They keep the vowel the same. So, they're just putting energy into the vowel. You don't want, I can make fun of anyone, and I'm not saying they'll do this, but you need to be listening that ah formation does not change. It doesn't want to distort. It doesn't want to stop wobbling. It doesn't want to suddenly turn bright. An example, Shama. That's a distorted vowel. You can hear it. It actually starts becoming quite ugly. Let's jump to things that you're going to be concerned about with the choir. If you just look at that first phrase. You know, we always expect wonderful things to happen. You go into rehearsal expecting musical things to happen. That has to be the approach. You go in with high expectations. But if we just look at the other side of the list, predict, if you can, what's going to go wrong. What are you mindful of? You look at this in the printed music and you say, oh, I can see what's going to be the problem. Anybody? While you're still thinking, let me tell you something that my Latin teacher once told me. He said, you have to put up your hand when he asks a question. So none of us were going to put up our hand. So he said, I'll tell you why. He said, because there may be somebody in the class who's either too afraid or too idle to ask. We thought we're all too afraid. Anybody? I'm not somebody who tends to pick on people till I'm comfortable, but I think Andre and David and Mish probably know what I'm trying to say. So it's much more effective if it comes from you than if I say it. So the question is, what's going to go wrong? What do you have to be vigilant about ensuring remain the same? Okay, I've given a clue. Okay, and there goes Mish. Thank you.
Well, you already mentioned ma, but I'm kind of worried about most of the syllables in that phrase. I'm worried about the diphthong of lay, although I'm worried a little bit more about Adonai and how that's not going to be nai or any folk version. And I'm quite scared about the sh, the beginning of Shema, actually, and about getting it out the way and it not being Shema. So those are just a few things that scare me.
It's fascinating because that was later on my list. So that's amazing that you brought them up now. Let's tackle that stuff. So consonants, lyrics, obviously, I mean, lyrics, consonants, vowels, clarity, too much diphthongs. Anybody want to jump? Because Mish has basically given us a clue to what all of the things we have to be concerned about. Okay, I'm going to jump then. Have we just been joined by somebody, or has somebody actually left the room? I'm moving on.
Joe's left.
Okay.
Temporarily.
So, you know, we can't predict everything that's going to happen, but the chances of there being too much sh are firstly because people are coming in too early. They're also, the problem with s's and sh's is that it's impossible to make a sound and sing s or sh at the same time. So if you're singing an R vowel, ah, sh, ah, s, you can't pitch s, s, s. In fact, Richard Branson still have £1 million out there for any human being that can sing s and make a pitch. S, s. That's the problem. As soon as you make a s sound, you're no longer singing. But I suspect you're not going to get 1, 2, 3. Shh. That means they haven't pitched. Because as soon as they make pitch, so you could get them to go, now I don't know what that is, but how would you spell that? UH? Well, actually, it's an apostrophe with nothing. So if I did it with just vowels, better to get collé or collet than collai. But then if you're, okay, I have to tread lightly. If you're conducting in certain parts of the country, I do realize this could be a challenge, but I'm assuming that even in those parts where some members of the choir have walk-on parts in EastEnders, they do sing Kolenu, not Kolainu. Does anybody, they do, yeah, they do know that. I won't tell you my stories with children. It's very difficult as a teacher. So I think the sh would be okay. Sh, sh. They just want to touch it. If they type SH, 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 SH in their singing, ask them to go in and delete all but one of those SH. It's not shh. They want to put the sh as soon as they start singing. Sh, sh. And you can ask for them to slither off razor-thin bits to the point where they're actually almost not doing a sh. I'm going to see if I can do that. Sh, 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 sh. The lightest sh. I think the ma would be fine, the ko would be fine, lay. Let's not go into diphthongs, but as we know, that consists of two sounds, e, a. But sometimes if you overanalyze, then people are going to start singing in a self-conscious way. So you just want to listen. If they're going lay, just ask them to sing more on the le. Shama kole le. The problem is if they put the e bit too early, that's when you get lay. So if they put that as late as possible, because it's lay, lay is what makes lay, we just don't realize it's two sounds. So you just want them to sing lay, yay. The e bit is very, very late. Lenu, but I actually sang lenu. If you get I mean, that's just a result of them physically, suddenly making a spout. So you might get them to say it. If they say lay nu, then obviously you need to pull it back. But I suspect they won't say that. So that should just mean it's something that they're doing which is strange in the singing, which is causing that to happen. So that's stuff in terms of consonants and vowels. Can we look at pitch? What's going to go wrong? Yes, here comes Julianne.
There are two places where there are some lines that go down. So they go down and they have a decrescendo at the same time. So the kolenu and the elohenu, specifically the sopranos and the tenors, I suspect that the pitch might go down more than what it should be.
So I completely agree with Julianne. I'm going to see her what she said and make the situation even worse. I suspect they won't even go up far enough. So if you get me plus Julianne, we're headed for disaster. Not if you're accompanied, but if you're doing this a cappella, you've sung 3 seconds and you're already starting to go flat. So it's not high, but you want to listen. Are the sopranos singing what you want? Or are they singing what they want? And then in a loving way, we want to suggest to them that they're not going to sit on the ma. Things that you sit on become squashed. We want to energize the ma, which goes back to what I was saying before. I would encourage you to give the choir the impression that ma is alive and well and is moving forward. Compare static shema, shema, which is a held note, as opposed to a note that's growing and has momentum and is joining up with its fellow cousins in the bar and later. So again, compare static, shema, with shema. It's much easier to energize the vowel when there's something going on than when you as the conductor in their face go sh, plonk. Shema. Even where your hand goes, I instinctively realize my hand goes to a higher plane on ko. Shema ko, as opposed to ma ko. I went ko. And I didn't even realize I was doing that. I don't normally have a camera showing my gesture. Now, I don't want everybody to say, so what you're doing is shema ko. No, I'm not doing that. I'm just saying that instinctively, as I feel the ma come to the end, my upbeat becomes higher as I drag them up into the air by my invisible puppet strings. What about the men? Julian's given you half the answer. Anybody want to jump on that one? So, yeah, thank you, Andre.
In the bass line, it's actually quite a static line. It's it holds the same note all apart from the very first note all the way through the line, the same pitch all the way through. Now, there's traditionally a risk in vocal singing of repeated pitches actually not being repeated pitches. That they tend to move, and actually making sure that holds all the way through is really important, because that's the whole foundation of all the harmony.
So I love that, because then it gives me a chance to talk about what I really like to talk about, is why is the music this way? Because, you know, we're so busy teaching it, but what about just, we haven't spent any time looking at the wonder of this music. So let's say you were given this. Whether you're a guitar player or whether you're an arranger or whatever, there are many things that you could do with this. So let's say you were going along and you say, oh, right, I'm going to put a chord. Hopefully you wouldn't put a chord at the beginning. You could, but I don't think it's to go from nowhere and go, you know, on a seventh chord on the dominant. It's a pickup note. It has no harmonic strength. It's an upbeat to ma. So it would be a shame to my ear to go sha from silence. So assuming that you get to ma, most people would say, okay, I'm going to put a tonic chord, which is G minor. Then, because the tune goes, most people would say, okay, so I'm going to put a dominant chord on Leinu. So I've gone to G minor, D major, G minor, and it would sound like this. I added a seventh just because I did. But what's that? So there are some other choices, but if we're going to stay within a certain style of music, compare what I just played to what's here. Now, I hope that you react chemically to that. The difference between and, because I think there's 3,000 years of suffering in the chord that we have, as opposed to, so this chord, no offense meant, is what I would expect you to find at Lidl. This is what I would expect you to find in the food court of Fortnum and Mason. And it's also interesting because if you had to analyze what the chord on Leinu is, it's very, very interesting what the harmony is. But the whole power of this phrase is, as Andre pointed out, because the bass note doesn't change. So even if those of you who don't think of yourselves as musical, but whatever, that's basically considered a pedal note. What that means is that the bass note doesn't change, but the harmonies are changing all the time. In fact, the most famous thing is when you ask a 5-year-old to play any note on a piano and bounce up and down like this. you get another kid to play a triad. That was a G, and they'll play this. Then you ask the kid to play A major, B flat. They can earn millions of dollars writing that sort of music because it works for a new Starship Enterprise leaving dry dock. It works for a Star Wars, Star Trek. It can be when Cunard launch a new liner. But that's a pedal note, and it doesn't have to move. So here's the issue. Are the basses going to maintain the pitch? Shama Kolenu. Julianne predicted, and I think correctly, that there's a possibility that they mistake the decrease in volume for decrease of vigilance, for decrease of energy. They start relaxing, so you're going to hear this. Shama Kolenu. They may not even be aware of it. As Andre said, repeated notes in any case in choral music have a tendency to drop. So start putting that all together, and muscularly, the crescendo calls for something more, and as soon as they stop doing that something more, the pitch could suffer. So it's all very well with me saying, give a simple upbeat after the preparation, give a small gesture for softness. Mish and I are very concerned about the vowels, the sh, the o, the diphthong. We want them to crescendo on the ma. But at the end of the day, if they're singing either Shama Kolenu, or the basses are singing Shama Kolenu, none of what we did matters. Because when the people taste the pie, it's undercooked. It's underbaked. The pastry is raw. The filling is still frozen. Do I need to give more analogies? Let's push on. So, Julianne said sopranos, the tenors could also have a problem. They may just not make that distance. Shama. And then the kolenu, as they get louder, might start smothering everybody. This is what it sounds like without the tenors. It doesn't sort of work. Why? Because you need the thirds between the tenors and the altos. That's the sandwich filling that makes it sound lovely. Take away the altos and the tenors. Add the tenors back. That lay chord is made by the altos. At the altos, hear that? Hear that tension? So at any point, you can trade off parts against each other. You can suggest to the basses that they're very musical. And that's the reason why, as they hear the sopranos, the tenors, and the altos moving towards them on the lay. Joe, have I said something I shouldn't? I'd love you to unmute and share, because that's a great...
Sorry, it's just stuff going on in the background at home.
Oh, okay. No, because that coincided with my saying, my basses are very musical, and then the person has a hysterical laughing fit. What I'm trying to say is, suggest to the basses that the reason, in fact, why the pitch is sagging is because they hear... They're encroaching. They can sense that the sopranos, the altos, and the tenors are starting to get near. If you played it on a piano, you can feel the hand getting closer. Then ask them about their driving technique. When they're on a motorway and another car is joining the motorway, but in the opposite direction, do they instinctively start panicking and moving lanes? No. Well, this is quite far away. This is over an octave away. You can ignore the soprano's basses. Don't be so musical. Don't be so sensitive. Hang on to where you are. Don't make room for them. Don't be so polite. This is not a moment to show chivalry. You need to stick to your guns. We are not making room for the woman of the house. Not in this case. You don't have to say basses once again. Once, you know, as a parent, oh no, here we go. That's not the tone you want to adopt. You want to encourage them to do the right thing, not discourage them from doing the wrong thing. Here comes David. Unmute, please. There we go.
In this particular case, on the third bar, when you go to Le Nu and the diminuendo, maybe there's a fear from maybe the bass line or all four lines that when they quieten down, they won't be loud enough. Do you see what I mean there, sort of?
So this is very, very useful because people want to know how loud is pianissimo? How loud is the mezzo piano? How big is the crescendo? Do you really return to a sound that's louder than the beginning but softer than the middle? And it's all relative. If you've got four people unmiked singing in St. Paul, actually it would work well in St. Paul's Cathedral, but singing in a modern synagogue built circa 1969 of concrete and a carpet, you probably need to forget everything that I've said about dynamic. But if you're in St. Paul's Cathedral with 4,000 people singing, you probably would suggest that some of them just mime. The other thing is, when you want them to do something a certain way, and you find that they cannot or will not, the other trick is to first take it back to basics. So if my choir was having a challenge getting that Le Nu, David suggested that, you know, they're not quite sure how loud or how soft what that diminuendo is I would take that all away. Let's just sing it straight. Shema Kolenu. So that was Lenu, and it's in tune. Lenu, basses, Lenu. Now, can you make the second sound, that's the nu, softer than the first? You know, we're not going to measure it. There's no Geiger counter. It should sound softer than the first. And they go, Lenu. That doesn't sound right. Nobody would speak that way if you were suddenly dropping your voice. You wouldn't do it in the middle of a word. It needs to be somewhere closer. So they go, Lenu. And say, I can't hear the difference. Can we split the difference? They go, Lenu. But what if they do Lenu? Well, can you, instead of doing this with the volume control, could you do Le? And they need to start getting a muscle memory. You know, if you're somebody who works mixing boards, then it's going up and down. If most people are used to a volume control that's going like that. So have the whole choir go, they can even speak it. They may just have never done it before. So you need to listen. Does it sound right? Is it musical? It's ridiculous. But a hint may not work. Sometimes people think, oh, it might be too salty, so I'll put 2 grains of salt in. Okay, I mean, you're not going to detect it. As Jamie Oliver would say, what does it need? More lemon, more. You can say, what happens if you hear Shema, smothering the melody? basses, 16 basses, 2 sopranos. Shema. I mean, imagine if all we hear is the bass for the first line. That's a very interesting melody. I throw these out not to make people obsessed that it's all going wrong. I can hardly blink without finding a mistake, let alone the way they blink. But the fact is, what I'm trying to say is, this is all telemetry. This is all information that you're receiving, and you have to decide what your priority is. So that's why I started with, they've got the notes, they've got the rhythms, they've got the text. If you want to say, okay, they've never seen this before, how would you go about teaching it? While it depends on the group, I would strongly encourage you from the get-go to inculcate certain values into the choir. If any of you have done any sort of teaching, particularly bar bat mitzvah, I would never introduce the idea of making a beautiful sound or joining notes together 3 years after they're going, Vaya ha 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 meh. As soon as I even introduce that, I'm saying to the student, we're trying to sing it smoothly. So if I've made a tape, a recording, let's say, and it's going, Vaya meh, that's just a learning tape. You must graduate your pupil to the next stage very quickly. The number of times I hear bar mitzvah students reproduce the recording of their bar bat mitzvah teacher, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheh. Okay, now we can speed it up. We can make it smoother. We can do one vowel. We're at almost the hour mark. Are there any questions at this stage? Here comes Zoe.
I've got 2 things that I'm wondering about that I'd love you to address. One is about breathing. And I should say that I am not a choir director and I don't typically conduct choirs, but I would not at all be surprised to hear Shema Kolenu, like to have a massive breath in that moment. And even more so, and I realize I'm jumping right to the end, and I know, Stephen, we've talked about this, but Et Tefi Latenu is a real struggle. So I'd love to know thoughts about that. And maybe just to throw in one other thing, which is we're talking a bit about people understanding what the text is, but I feel like something you communicate really amazingly when you teach, Stephen, is about what is the message of the text. And we haven't talked much about that. And this is such a gorgeous text to do that with. I'd love to do that a little bit too.
So let's do the breathing thing first. That's really simple. It may well be that you're conducting it too slowly and they physically can't sing it at that speed, which is not to give you an permission to put it into Shema Kolenu. It isn't that. But you may want to think that maybe you're just being a bit lugubrious, self-indulgent. Maybe you're forgetting that you don't have the strings of the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. You've got Sadie, Betty, Matthew, and Jesus. And he's singing soprano. There are people called Jesus, by the way. Having said that, it doesn't make any sense to breathe in the places where it doesn't make any sense to breathe. So we were talking about that last time. I do realize that because of health challenges, because of age and so forth, there are some people who will not be able to get through that phrase. That's not the same as, but do they have the intention? So if you're hearing, Shema, most people can sing on one breath for longer than that. So if they can't, immediately you're doing your forensics. Are all your choir going like this? But they're actually not breathing. To what extent do they actually leave their breath to some audible forgive me, asthmatic gasp just before they sing sh. They could actually start taking in a deep breath for that whole bar that we're not actually giving them. How much more so do they need to make sure that they're breathing really into their lungs, deep down, filling up these two balloons in the preparatory breath. That's what it's all for, the breath. Breathe. Sure. I mean, if I do an audible breath, listen to how long the breath is on that upbeat. I put it to you that if they took a real breath, they could sing the whole of the first line in one breath. A human being is capable of that. Physiologically, that can be done. We know that we're going to take a moment after Leinu, but singing after Shah, taking a breath after Shema rather, I think that you just want to encourage them not to breathe. And you can make a musical case for that. You can make a textual case for that. Those two words go together. It's not Shema, comma, and Kolenu is the name of the person. It's hear our voice, hear our cry, listen to our voices. It doesn't matter how your machzor translates it. Those two words go together. You can't go, once upon a time. It doesn't make sense. Happy birthday. It's happy birthday. That's one. But they're going to breathe after the nu. Now, in terms of staggered breathing, which normally is not staggered breathing as in I'm staggering because I'm running out of breath. It means breathing at a different time. You're allowed to go, Shema, Kole. You could go, Sha, breath. You could join the ma on on the second beat. You can say, nobody's going to join the ma on the third beat, so I'm going to pick that as a choir member because odds are nobody would be stupid enough to do that. So I'm going to breathe. I'm going to sing Sha. I'm going to take another breath on ma, and I'm not going to start singing again until the third beat of ma. Here's what it sounds like. Breath. Sha. Now, you're saying, what? A choir member, ultimately, what are you going to do? Encourage them to be clever about this. Of course, when they come in, you mustn't know. You can say to somebody, you can breathe wherever you want, but you can't breathe after ma. So you have to breathe sometime during ma or before ma, but you have to be singing ma, ka. You must do ma, ka. That sound must continue. Here's David.
The only thing is, I would start to worry about everyone getting the same clever idea. Great minds think alike, and then.
So that's normally, but there are always some people who say this is ridiculous. Of course, I can sing that in one breath, and so forth. And if you find that everybody's doing that, that may happen the very first time you do it. And by the way, you don't have to suggest only one idea. In fact, you don't have to suggest any idea. You can just say breathe wherever you want, but I need you to go ka, ma, ka, ka. There cannot be a silence. So do whatever you want. Don't tell me about it. I don't want to know. But if you're breathing in a funny place, when you restart singing, you must not draw attention to yourselves. There are some people who don't understand, and they'll go, Shema, Akon. When you come in again after taking that sneaked breath, I don't want to know about it. You cannot draw attention to yourself. But I challenge you, even at a slower tempo, they can do Well, if they can do that, then they can certainly do what we want. I know I was showing off. But what I'm saying, they can do it. I promise you, they can physiologically do it. And they can practice. And this leads to something else. You know, what are we doing in the warm-ups? Warm-ups? I'm lucky if I can even get to the music I've got to go through. I've got no time for warm-ups. Well, the question is, can they go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go 1, 2, 3, 4, or better still, you do the count and they do ah, then they die. Over a period of 5 or 6 weeks, I put it to you, you'll be counting to 8, when the first week maybe they couldn't get past 3. Lung capacity, by the way, changes. People who do any sort of aerobics will tell you the capacity of the lungs, you can actually get to a point where your body will adjust. That's one of the challenges, by the way, of cardio. You start off breathless and then you hit a plateau. Well, you have to increase the incline. You have to increase the speed. You have to increase the duration. Why? Because the body will adapt. There are other places about the breathing that I need to answer the more interesting thing, which is about text. So, Shema Kolenu, breath, Adonai Eloheinu, breath. In fact, see that little breath mark? That's saying there is a guaranteed breath. There isn't one after the nu, because maybe you want to have that whole line sung in one. Don't spend a lot of time trying to do that. It's not important. Chos v'rachem aleinu, not chos v'rachem aleinu. That is a fallback plan, but nobody is going to say that breathing after chos and v'rachem is better than chos v'rachem. I mean, even if you were saying that, and begging or pleading or putting some emotion, if you went pity and be compassionate, you wouldn't go pity, and then there's dead air. It doesn't do anything. Horse break vera. Yeah, I could make a case for it, but we want horse verachem. By the way, it could be chos v'rachem. Look, it's on a first inversion chord. So instead of the basses being on the G, which they were for the whole of the first line, which would sound like this, it's vulnerable because the basses are a third up. They start on a B flat, which is a first inversion. So not this, it's... And it sets up the Chaim chord, which is a B flat major chord. Then look at this little bit of Worcestershire sauce that comes from the altos. Can you hear how they spike the chord? Because it could be... But it's... Can you feel that tension? And then it resolves. And suddenly, we're in blue waters. And the sun's out and there's no tide. Compassion. We're desperate, but it's okay. It's going to be okay. So there's the chus, which Mish and I are worried about. There's the chaim instead of chaim. If I was having my choir say this, it's kolenu Adonai. There are no consonants or about Eloheinu. It's cho sverachem. Not because I want it to sound like sverachem, but I want it to sound correct. So it may be that we're singing it with a sound that doesn't feel right, but it comes out sounding correct. So I'm telling them, don't sing the sa, put it on the ver. But if it then goes, cho svara, then that's not right. You have to do it in order to get the right sound. But then I am going verachema, verachema. So I'm singing on the che, and I'm putting the m on the aleinu. Malenu. Chos verachemaleinu. But if they go malenu, I'm saying there's no Hebrew word malenu, to the best of my knowledge. You know, it sounds Italian to me. I'm going to move on because there are two more things we have to do. One is to answer Zoe's other question. This is magical music. And the reason why it's magical is because with 4 notes, it does something incredibly powerful. Hear our cry, hear our voice, listen to our voice. We've spoken about this. If you sing it sanitized, it's still beautiful. In North America, they call that, you know, it's too Protestant or it's too Anglo-Protestant. You know, I mean, it's offensive to say that. I prefer to say it's basically so much disinfectant has been applied. There's neither good nor bad bacteria. It doesn't do anything. There's no humanity in that. It sounds like a MIDI file. I can actually sing like that without even moving my lips. The idea is we're trying to convey this text. We're actually trying to do a load of other things. I mean, for me, conveying the text is just obvious because if we weren't, then we would be just saying it. But it needs to be said. We're trying to illuminate the text, but I'm trying to do much more. I'm trying to do something that's not of this world for my choir, let alone for the congregation. I'm trying to transport them because we could go, you know, okay, if that works for you, you know, my condolences. I'm trying to do something that speaks what I believe is to the human condition. 4 parts, balanced, where we don't sit, we emote, but it's not contrived. I'm not asking for I mean, it's ridiculous. That's not what choral singing is about. But somewhere between those two is a natural sense of a note that's sustained for 3 beats, that grows and attaches itself and ends up with this beautiful combination of Shema Kolenu, and it happens to rhyme. Adonai Eloheinu. Adonai. Look at the amazing thing, just to draw attention to it if you haven't noticed. Basses, you know, Andrea and I are just hoping that the basses, and we're encouraging them to stay in tune and to emote. And by the way, when they feel bored, your job is to say, without you basses, if you were changing notes, the magic of this music would be destroyed. Listen. The magic is from the basses. It only makes sense by having the basses not move around. But look at the tenor line, Adonai Eloheinu. If you lose that tenor line, you get rubbish. Well, why'd you get rubbish? Because the altos and the basses are doing the same. The distance between the basses and the sopranos is massive. But when you put the tenors in, why does that work? Because the tenors and the sopranos are singing in 6, or it's thirds but displaced. They're going... You'd probably naturally add in that harmony part. Here it's added a 6th below the sopranos. Without the basses, it makes no sense. Put the basses in, suddenly it starts making sense. But the altos put a little bit of matzah meal, just a tablespoon of flour, 1 egg, just to bind the salmon fish cake together. I'm trying to get a smile from Zoe. There it is. And with the altos, it suddenly makes sense. It's the glue that holds it together. And when the tenors nuzzle up against the altos, they're next door to each other. They're literally touching. It draws attention to the problem of tenors screaming that. Tenors not understanding that without them, this music would be nothing, but overdo it, and it suddenly ceases to become a flavored something, but that becomes the thing itself. Understand? We don't want to scare people. If it's a beautifully cooked steak with peppercorn sauce, it's just sauce. When all you taste is it's so much pepper, there's so much chili, you're actually burning and you're calling the London Fire Brigade, something's gone wrong. So if the tenors can only go, Adonai, they need to sing that another way, which raises a whole topic of what voices do you have? How could you encourage to make the most of what they've got? Very quickly, if your tenors are unable to sing that softly, they need to be singing it with a different sound. And the beauty is, if they do what they might think is a Dame Edna Everage impersonation, that is in fact how you're supposed to sing this. Adonai. Hello, possums. And they're supposed to do it in their fake, what they think is the woman's voice, but it sounds so beautiful when you sing like that. Adonai. That sound, it sounds like an alto sound. Oh my God, you mean 2 parts are now the same instrument of the orchestra? Yes, the same instrument of the orchestra. You mean you don't want the basses to sound like contrabassoons, the flutes to sound like trumpets, sorry, the tenors to sound like trumpets, the altos to sound like didgeridoos, no offense meant, and the sopranos to sound like piccolos. You're right, I don't want that. I want a flute choir. I want a string orchestra. I want a vocal quartet. So that's my school. You have to trust me that if you like the sound of John Rutter, King's College, Cambridge, St. Paul's Cathedral, that's what they're doing. They're not saying, come on, basses, we come from Russia. Is that the best you've got? I want the Red Army choir sound. Jawohl, comrade. And we live, you know, in the country that has Welsh miners choir. Come on, lad, I want you to put some welly into. No, because then you'll end up with a Jewish choir. You want to sound beautiful. You want to sound gorgeous. You want your altos to sing with that natural warm sound. You want the tenors to sound like, I have often walked down this street before, not, I have walked. You don't want to sound, you want to sound light and floaty and elegant and refined and gorgeous. You want to look like you've had a shower, that you're wearing fresh clothes, that you're shaved, that your fingernails are clean, that you're not wearing, you know, open-toed sandals and you need a pedicure. That's what you want. Because then when the congregation encounter this, they say, oh my God, that's beautiful. And then you transport them. I don't want the congregation to sing along to this. I want them to close their eyes. I want them to realize that we're taking them somewhere else. Et tefillatenu. There's nothing wrong with bottom line. I just love the idea of not going predictable, uvra, and it's not uvaratson. I'm from the school that says when you put u before a word such as on the day, it's not uva-yom ha-shabbat, it's uv-yom. It's not bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad ushma echad, it's ushma echad. Whatever your rule is, you should be consistent. Don't go ushma echad, but go uva-yom ha-shabbat. So it's not Uvayom, 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 uvayom. Hashabbat is uvyom, 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 uvyom. But there are other schools which will tell you that it's uvayom, but then they don't always do it like that. So go figure. In my school, it's uvratson, not uvaratson. Uvratson. The kabel berachamim uvratson. So the word is ratson, then it's and the. It's not uberatson because there'd be a dagesh, but it's not uveratson. And there are hundreds of other examples. But it's too predictable for me, anyway, to go uvratson, breath. So that's why I've written no breath. And musically, when you don't take a breath there, it's a startling experience. Oh, I've noticed a typo. It says, second line, chus v'rachem aleinu vekabel ve. That's V apostrophe, not ve. You'll notice in all my music, I normally correct that. Shavaz are just the consonant with an apostrophe. Otherwise, people go bedikat chametz. It's not bedikat, it's not B-E-D, it's B apostrophe D. So this is vekabel, V apostrophe, not V-E. Anyway, so I'm looking for and you keep singing. If you can, it's unbelievable. It's just startling. It's a shock because we all expect, oh, Ratson, gasp, et. But et doesn't mean anything. And the Hebrew is, v'kabel berachamim uvratson, in other words, accept, like Kabbalat Shabbat, kabel berachamim. How do you want God to accept this? Berachamim, with compassion, within, uvratson. What do you want him to accept? Et tefilatenu. So ideally, you're saying, v'kabel berachamim uvratson et tefilatenu. You could actually get rid of berachamim uvratson and say, v'kabel tefilatenu. V'kabel et tefilatenu. So I don't want a breath. So you're saying, oh my God, so you want them to go from the middle of the second line to the end? No, I just don't want them to breathe after tzon. And obviously also after bel. So all you have to do is just say, you can't breathe after tzon. That's it. So if they want to go, also you can't bill after bel or mim because those are sustained notes. So one person go, they'll take one on the tzon. Fantastic. But the tz's already gone. So now you can only sing on. And when you come in, I don't want to know about it. There are so many places where you can take a breath. You'll find that it's magical. Now, there's the technical problem, and we have to get on to the other piece. Song. I can't do it up the octave. Even I can't reach that. Song. When that happens, it's startling. It's startling. A crescendo followed by suddenly putting all the voices behind a carpet. It's dramatic. You're confident. You've said, you know what? Accept with compassion. There's a bit of tension going on here. You're building up. The pulse is going. You're getting a bit of a sweat. It's getting a bit exciting. It's not running, but it's passionate. You can hear the heartbeat. Ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. V'kabel harachamim uvratzon. The listeners do that. Let alone the singers. It's very hard to do because the vowel has to not distort. Don't drive yourselves crazy, but if you achieve it, you'll love it. then there's no way you can go through. But you could decide not to break there. I mean, I'm not pushing my luck. I want the tson effect. So I'm saying, give me the tson, I'll give you a breath. But really, I want Uvaratzon et tafi. The other thing is this. That's why I've written move. That's an instruction to you guys. You can speed up. Don't go ridiculous. It can't be missed from the other thing. But it's one word, tefilatenu. So this is acceptable. One word. It doesn't feel like I got faster. It just flows. On the next page, there's some divisi. Don't go crazy. Figure out what you can do. The chances are the lower divisi of the alto will make it sound more gorgeous than if you do the top part. But that applies to all divises. Without the bottom part of the altos on top of page 2, the music sounds like it's from the court of Henry V. We need the third. Understand? You're just making a musical choice to get something that's right. The original harmonization in the so-called Blue Book is a little bit of an embarrassment, even if that's what you grew up singing, which is what I did. The original is, I remember, then it has, which is sort of, it's very insipid. I find it's sort of, no, of all the choices, that's not one of them. The power of this music is immediately, it's reduced to something banal by going. I can't even remember. No. So I've just imbued it with more bass note. Here comes the crunch. Because when you come back to Hashem, it's great. You come home. So home for me isn't, that's, I don't know what that is. That's a bus shelter. It's, I'm home and I've returned. That's why I've got all that juicy stuff going on V'nashuva. Because when I come back to something that I love, or I come back to something and I know it's the place I should be, I have a much better feeling than, that's not how I feel. We are going to now ask the most important question. Am I presuming that since it's coming up to 9 o'clock, you're all about to press that leave meeting button? Is there anybody who must go, in which case we'll do the wrap up, but are they, let's ask the other way. Are there any other people who'd be willing to stay on 10 more minutes just so that we can look at Shalom Aleichem, or I can at least show you the things that you need to look at? Is there anybody who can't stay on just for a few more minutes? Okay, so Joe, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the wrap up. I told you about, I think you were here when I mentioned about the sessions at conference. We've spoken that the 3 pieces of music are what we looked at last time, the Shamaru, the Shema Kolenu today, and the Shalom Aleichem. We're asking people to do the best that they can. Nobody is being auditioned. Nobody's going to be, nothing is going to happen. We're doing this with very good intentions. And the more that your choir is prepared, the more they'll get out of it. They'll just be slightly demoralized if they arrive and they just don't even know the notes. So I just strongly encourage you to help them with as much of that as you can. We don't have another online session booked. So the next time I see you will hopefully be in the flesh. I would encourage you to reach out to me, as some people have. Some people have even asked for music, and I haven't forgotten them. Some people have asked private questions, but those of you who haven't got round to it, this is at the moment, I don't know if I said at the moment, this is a free resource. You're not taking advantage of it. I don't say that with sadness. Believe you me, I've got a lot to do, but you're not taking advantage of me, and I want you to take advantage of me in an appropriate way. So you need to be asking questions because you'll get answers. So I would encourage you to write to me. I'm wondering if Sarita's just joined us, whether you have anything that from a housekeeping point of view or anything you'd like to remind people of, and then Zoe will have the last word. Or do you want to jump in now, Zoe? Yes, okay.
I'll jump in just so Sarita can think for a second. I just want to clarify that if people are thinking about being part of the masterclass where you have the chance to conduct it with a group and get some feedback, what you might want to do is think about what piece of music you want to conduct, because you probably don't want to conduct in front of a group with a piece of music you don't know. So if you have something that is about a page or maximum 2 slides, if you send it to us, we can print it for you. That can be part of the resources for that session, but it does mean you'll need to think about it ahead of time. So we'll put that in the kind of general information that goes out, but because the people who are most likely to take advantage of it are on this call, I just wanted to say to you, maybe have a think about whether there's something that you conduct a lot that would be useful to do with a group, potentially this group, singing with you, and get some feedback about. And then we're going to ask you to send it to us so that we can print it for people. Or, of course, you can bring 25 copies of the music with you if you want to do it that way.
So may I just jump? It would be even more effective if people are thinking, you know what, I'd love to have some time in front of a good choir, and I am thinking of a potential piece or two, that they would send it to you, but I'll have a chance to look at it. I mean, if they could send a choice of maybe 2 or 3, that would be really useful, because something that throws up more issues or that is easier for us to get to the conducting or interpretation things would be better if there's a choice. And then I can say, we have a go with that. So people, if you can start putting your thinking hats on, it can even be a piece, you know, that you've written that you'd like to hear. But we want to get to, you know, don't bring on something that people will be really challenged because it's so difficult to sight read, or some really esoteric text, or, you know, we're not looking for a tonal music or something mainstream that will give people a chance, particularly if people have not had a chance ever to conduct 4 parts. Sorry, I just felt that's important. I would like to vet what we do. From the fact that you're not speaking anymore, is that Sarita's cue?
So for me, I would just really love your choirs to be with us. And if as yet your choir members haven't booked and you need something from me, whether that's because some of them are working during the day and can't come for the whole thing, or I think some have a bar mitzvah they have to do on Shabbat morning, then please let me help you make them get here to all the bits they can get to. Whether that's daily rates or whatever, we'll work it out, but you will really benefit so much more if they are here with you. Yeah.
Then I'm going to throw out an idea and just gauge the reaction. This is not something I've cleared with the powers that be, but I don't think it's particularly controversial. I often wondered when I took my choirs to do things like you would do it, like you're doing. In other words, I'm given music, I'm preparing my choir off-site, we're coming to meet. Why was I never sent what I would call the teacher's notes? Be vigilant about this, look out for bar 5 this, there's a tendency this, and so forth. They never did it. So I always used to do it with primary school choirs, never got any feedback, you know. And when I got to the performance, it was as though nothing that I had said, please be careful, look out, there's, you know, watch the S, look at the, it's as though they'd either deleted it, ignored it, or they didn't understand it. There's only one thing that I want to draw people's attention to, is actually a mistake, which I'd really not want to fall through the cracks. But how about, instead of me saying that it's going to be 10 minutes, but it turning out to be 10 hours, why don't I write to you? Why don't I give you the script of what I would say to you about Shalom Aleichem, and then encourage you to ask me some questions, to say, can you tell me some more about that? Or when you said in bar, what exactly do you mean? Because I'm trying to cultivate in your minds that when a piece of music that you may or may not have heard, but let's say you know a piece of music, lands in front of you, when you look at it, immediately you're flooded with, what do I have to do? What do they have to do? What's the Hebrew? What's the harmony? What's the text? What's the da-da? What's the thing? What are my priorities? What's going to go wrong? What's going to go right? Where should I start teaching the piece? Which is the bar that will always be right and never begin there? That's the last, that you don't even have to teach that. It will just take care of itself. Never teach that bar. It always take care of itself. Start right at, and let's just see what happens, which means all I have to tell you is that there's a mistake which comes again and again, which you can do, but you're going to beat yourselves up trying to get it right. And I would say that once I remove it, life will be much easier. And it comes again and again. So the first time is on page 2. It's the second line, second bar, which is bar 20. I'll say again, page 2, second line, second bar in the tenor parts. When that bar comes, and it comes again and again, their line is... It sounds innocuous. In context, it's incredibly annoying to sing. I'll start the line, tenor line. Dosh Baruch Hu Mi. It's going to be the E at the top of the phrase is going to get a bump. It's annoying. It doesn't fit in, and nobody likes singing it. The reason it's there is in order to align with the piano part that is going up a scale at that time. D sharp, E, and it carries on up. But since the tenors do not carry on up, and when they sing what's written, they clash with the altos who are sustaining a D sharp, I would suggest that you remove that E in the tenor bar. So the part for tenors, bar 20 is Hu, Mi, Me. So the 5th note of the bar has been removed, and we're just going to sustain the D sharp through that missing note, and they sing Hu, Mi, Me, and it comes again, penultimate bar of page 3. So one bar before the end on page 3, it's exactly the same problem. It comes again on page 5, top line, last bar. Again, we want Hu, Mi. You don't have to have the tenors go up to the E. And it comes lastly on page 6, bottom line, second bar, which is bar 60, same thing. For those of you who aren't used to this, you'll notice it's always page, line, bar. If I said second bar, you don't know which page I'm on. Bottom line, you don't know which page I'm on. Page 6. Now you know page 6. You turn to page 6 and now you can't remember what I said. So just think about how you tell your choir. Turn to page 8, bottom line, second bar, not the second bar of the bottom line of page 8. I will write this up in the next few days. I'll send it to you and we'll see how that works. It's now 9:06. I just do want a word from everybody. When I say a word, just to hear their voices. So Millie, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask either for you to say what worked for you today, or something that stuck out, something that you learned, something that you enjoyed, because obviously we'll have the real heart-to-heart in July. So if you want to unmute and just say some very encouraging words to your colleagues.
Yeah, I found it very interesting, the amount of detail, a lot of dynamics in some of this. I wonder how I'm going to convey all that to my Bolshoi choir members, but I will have a go.
That's very good. I would like to say that the reason for this is that we want to make the dish very tasty.
Yes.
Very flavorful. We're not interested in bland, where you just put slices of mozzarella on a plate.
I want everything MF right the way through.
No, we don't want medium loud.
No.
You need salt, you need pepper, you need balsamic, you
Yeah.
need cinnamon, you
Yeah.
need, what is that? Sushi. Even the rice in sushi is flavored. It's not just boiled rice.
Yes, it would require them to actually look at me though when I'm conducting.
And we're going to talk about why they don't or why they can't at the session in July. Andre, thank you, Millie. If you want to mute up. And Andre, what did you enjoy? What worked for you? An observation? Whatever.
Well, I thought it's really useful to see what you were saying about some of the tips with staggered breathing and stuff. Sure, many of my choir members will be pleased about that, although I think I might have to demonstrate it a few times to some of them.
And with all of these new things for your choir, guys, remember it's a process. Don't get frustrated if they don't catch on right away and that you might have to say it a couple of times because they weren't all there the first week. And not everybody is paying attention and not everybody learns the same way and not everybody understands your accent and not everybody is willing. Not everybody wants to comply. You know, there are many reasons why people don't do things, but consistency is the key. You just keep asking, you keep showing, sell it to them. It's not a list of demands for its own sake. It's because you believe in the beauty of the music. If you can, or if your accompanist can, show them what it sounds like without them. Show them what it's like to remove chocolate from chocolate cake. It's no longer chocolate cake, etc. Andre, thank you. David, what you liked, what you enjoyed, what worked for you, any comment?
I did really enjoy actually breaking down to each, almost each individual note. So
Right.
the real nitty gritty of it, and it conveys the music even more. However, I do have a slight worry, particularly with Shema Kalenu, as it is a piece that the choir do sing at Salikot and places like that, where we have a different version to what I'm seeing here. So trying to obviously the intention is to convey this version to them ahead of Shirei Chagiga. I'm just worried that obviously because the choir have been singing for 40, 50 odd years, it's when you sing something the same way for 50 odd years, you do become set in your ways.
Brilliant. David, I'm going to interrupt. Could you give me a show of hands if you will have more time to spend on Shalom Aleichem if we say you only have to do the first page of Shema Kolenu? If we were to say just do the first page, which is not that different from the original, in other words, forget page 2 with the reharmonization and the divises, learn simply the first page of Shema Kolenu, would that make people's life easier? Could you put up your hand if it will make your life easier? So, Sarita, that's because your choir's already learned everything. Julianne saying, it's good either way.
Sorry, I don't because I'm a maternity cover. I'm not actually sure what I'm expected to be covering yet in terms of the
completely understand. Zoe, do I have the power to make an executive decision? Because I would rather that we do a few pages of Shalom Aleichem rather than find that people are demoralized at conference. Here comes Zoe.
So I would even take it further and say, absolutely, let's not have demoralized people at conference, but even more, actually, maybe what it would give us a chance to do, Stephen, is to learn from you how you would work with people on learning a new way of singing a text that people know really well. So if people are doing brilliantly and you feel they're up for it, and you may not, but if you do, actually you taking people on the journey that says, this is what we've always done. What would happen if we tried to not have our burgers and chips, but to eat sushi instead? Let's try it together now. Doesn't matter if you don't sing exactly the right notes. Doesn't matter if you don't get it right. But for you to lead people on that journey might actually be really insightful for all of us, as well as for the crowd who are there.
Amazing, because you've actually given me an idea. If we actually reduce the burden, there could come a point where we actually could invite one of our colleagues to conduct the mass choir in this piece which they know and they have taught, and then have a bit of fun experimenting with different gestures, different speeds and so forth, in a way that if we're going to all be getting, oh my God, we don't know this, and we wish that I don't think I need to say any more. So that is now official, which we'll need to communicate to everybody who wasn't here, that we're not so far, of all the pieces, the change is that we're only doing page 1 of Shema Kolenu. Very good, David. That was extremely helpful. Zoe, do you want to go again? Or maybe I'll bring you in at the end. Then you can eat dinner. Mish, what worked for you? Something you'd like to comment? Anything you like?
One of the things that I wrote in capitals after you said it was encourage them to do the right thing, don't discourage them from doing the wrong thing. And I think that's great, because there, particularly what we did in Shema Kolenu, there were so many traps where it would have been possible to just sort of say, can you not go flat? Can you not? Can you not? Can you not?
Oh, yeah, which is all you've got. No!
Scream face. So I love the challenge of making sure you encourage the right stuff rather than telling them off about the wrong stuff.
I think that's very good. Sarita and who else? Oh, the person with the bicycle helmet has gone. But in fact, that's something that as parents you're encouraged to do too. You can't do it all the time, but if your intention is right, then you can be forgiven for keeping the smile on your face, but showing go to hell with your eyes. Julianne, hello.
Yes, hi. I think something that I found very interesting is the idea of finding the problems before you enter the room, and also finding solutions before. I think it'll just make a much more productive rehearsal process to be able to kind of predict what could go wrong.
So I love that, Juliana. Again, I'm going to go from the world both of fitness, but also yoga. I mean, some of you will have expertise in different things. When you're an experienced teacher, or let's say you're an experienced coach in a gym, you know what people do when they do a push-up, when they do a pull-up. You know what injury is likely to happen. You know what they need to be vigilant about. You have to say straight back, tummy tight. Or you have to say, don't slouch, or stand tall, or bend your knees. Why? Because otherwise there'll be an injury. So we all need to develop that repertoire of repeated notes that go flat, phrases that go up, that don't go far enough, vowels that are cut through s's and sh's, put in the consonant onto the next thing, and so on and so forth. That's just for the choir. What are the things that we do that in fact telegraph the opposite of what we want? So thank you for that. Sarita, is there anything you want to add?
I've really enjoyed it, and my singing was amazing.
I heard every note, and I'd like to book you for my next high holiday service.
I'm there.
Thank you. We don't provide travel expenses, though.
I'll join online.
Thank you. Zoe, it's you get the final word before I say goodbye to everyone.
So I think that the thing that I loved is you helping us understand about your choice of harmonization and what that does to the text. That really is something that I'm pretty passionate about in terms of how we communicate the text with the music. And I think also, a part of me felt like, okay, we're still talking about the same piece and it's just two sides of one page, basically. Actually, I think if we could take this as something that says, if we are taking our work seriously. Oh, have you all lost me?
I heard you. It did go funny, but I think we're okay now.
Sorry. If we take our work seriously enough to give it this amount of time, both preparation and supporting our singers in thinking that this is really serious work, I think we will benefit massively what we get back. And that feels really exciting to me, just putting this amount of time into some really key pieces. I think that's really exciting work. One last thing I just wanted to say is, if I were conducting a choir, I might feel slightly intimidated now that there's a whole host of things that I mustn't do wrong, and I must make sure that my choirs don't get wrong when they turn up to Shirei Chagiga. And I just want to acknowledge that we're all working with really different communities, with really different choirs. Some people have got 3 people in the choir, and some people have got 43 people in the choir, and that everybody is welcome. And I know, Stephen, that this is something you feel. I just wanted to make the implicit explicit, that this is not, no one's going to say to you, well, we told you not to breathe before X, why is your, that's just
okay.
not going to...
So I'm going to address that head on. That's not the point. So if you think that that's what we've been doing, I'm sorry to disabuse you of that, but you've missed the point, because I'm not interested in that at all. Firstly, there is no Olympic style walking in of your choirs. There's no silos or ghettos where they're going to be parked. We're not going to color coordinate with ribbons so that we know who's singing. On the contrary, I hope that we will actually can break some of the Siamese twin relationships that in your choir and get people to sit with other people that they don't know, let alone going into mixed order, which is something else that we should talk about at some point. That's number one. Number two, we're in this together, and if I didn't feel that, then doing this online wouldn't be happening. I mean, I have nothing to gain by doing this. You know, I'm not trying to audition anybody. What I'm trying to do, in fact, I'm not even trying, I am doing, is setting up a spirit of collaboration. When I'm working with your choirs, you're equally present and probably should be interrupting and asking why and saying things that help and support. It's not a competition. In fact, I won't even know if people are doing things wrong. I'm not going to say, who's singer? It's not what we're there for. We want to give people a foundation in order that when they leave conference, they are inspired to allow you to take them on a different journey than perhaps they've gone on with you before. Or if they have been on that journey for many, many years, that they'll be a little bit more adventurous, that they will have a sonic audio experience unlike anything else, that will validate them and say, this type of music making has an equal place in the Reform repertoire. It's many more spiritual and musical and psychological things than whether or not the basses are going flat. In any case, if the basses go flat, then we will encourage them to sing in tune, and we'll fix it in 5 seconds, because you know that all those things can be fixed in 5 seconds. Thank you to Zoe. Thank you to Sarita, of course, for setting this all up. I will be sending out the Shalom Aleichem thing. I encourage you to write to me, because if you don't, you're not making the most of your online membership. If we don't have anything else, it's thank you to Millie, to Andre, to David, Zoe, Mish, Julianne, and Reform. I wish you all a very peaceful and restful night, and I'll see you in July.
I just want to say a big thank you, Stephen, to you. Really, really thank you for giving up so much time and really thinking so carefully about how to help us. It makes a huge difference. And
it's my pleasure.
So
we're going to go 1, 2, 3, then all press stop video. Here we go. It's in the bottom left-hand corner. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Good night.
Good night.
Who's that redhead?
It's Mish.
Wow, amazing. So David could still be there, and we just don't know, and he could be listening to us. And there he is.
Hi, David.
Hi, David. There's always a lurker. David, by the way, it's a real pleasure to meet you. I mean, we don't know each other, but I really admire you. I know some choirs where they also do a shared conducting thing. And when you can cultivate that and it actually works, the choir can be, it's unbelievable because they get different energy. You can both support each other. Sometimes you need the other parent to say the thing that they're tired of the first parent hearing. Presumably you're consistent in what you're asking for, yet you each bring different skills and taste and so on to the table. So I just want to put that on the record, not that it's being, are we being recorded?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, apparently we are. But I'd like to put it on the record that I very much admire